Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session, which deals with the regional potential of wind energy. And we have that sort of session here in Istanbul because we regard from the Global Wind Energy Council and our Turkish friends for the Turkish Wind Energy Association, Istanbul as a sort of a hub if it comes to deals with countries neighboring it, be it to the east or to the west or to the southwest of Turkey. So Turkey and Istanbul play a central role in mediating business and has been a business hub for quite some time. So welcome this morning to this session, and I'd like to introduce our speakers first. The first to present to you is, I hope I do pronounce it correctly, is Jaime Bahar, who represents the International Energy Agency. He works with the Renewable Energy Division as a market analyst and is focusing at the medium-term Renewable Energy Market Report, which is published annually. And the Global Wind Energy Council, I might say, gives an input into that report. Before IEA, Jaime worked as a trade policy analyst at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where he analyzed domestic inventive measures for renewable energy sources with possible trade implications. He also worked on cross-border trade in electricity and the development of renewables-based electric power. Prior to that, he was involved in a consultancy project with the World Bank on the arsenic contamination of water in Bangladesh. He graduated from Sabanci University and holds a master's degree on energy resources and environment from the Paul H. Nitze School of Advanced International Studies of Johns Hopkins University. Please, Jaime, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. I try to come every year and try to give an international perspective to wind energy markets. I'd like to thank TWEC for organizing this, and thanks for Mr. Chair for its initial introduction. The title of my presentation is "Where is Turkey?" It's simple because I will try to situate Turkey among different regions because I think it's important to understand what is Turkey's potential and what are the drivers of and challenges of Turkey that Turkey has. So we basically publish this report of medium-term renewable energy market report every year. It basically looks at a medium-term forecast of all renewable energy technologies around the world. We try to understand the expected capacity and generation globally, and what are the drivers and challenges of renewable energy technologies in the market compared with conventional technologies. I would like to start with a general slide in renewable trends globally. So this is what we see going through 2020. We see a strong momentum for renewable electricity. Renewable energy technologies are growing, and renewable electricity projected to scale up by 45% between 2013 and 2020. So, which means that renewables are becoming more and more important in the market. And next, they basically surpass natural gas generation in 2013. We expected this to happen in 2015, but it already happened in 2013. So last year, renewable generation surpassed natural gas and doubled the nuclear generation globally. So this is good news. And wind is an important player in the global electricity market, and its share in global electricity generation increased from 7% in 2006 to 19% in 2013, and it's expected to grow to 25% in 2020. However, we see different trends in different parts of the world, where I will try to situate Turkey. We see two different trends. One, the one in OECD, which means in developed countries more or less, we see that renewables are playing a major role of the new capacity coming online. The reason why is that there are renewable policies that are implemented there, but on the other hand, these markets, as we call, are stable, which means power demand is not growing. So the fact that power demand is not growing and you put policies on renewables, whatever you add is mostly renewables. So renewables is expected to account for 80% of new generation in OECD region. And basically, we will see other conventional technologies to have difficult times in Europe and in some other parts of the developed world with renewables growing. The other dynamic is a little bit different. It's in non-OECD region. Renewables are the largest new generation source in non-OECD. However, at the same time, conventional technologies are growing as well. This means that renewables only will occupy 35% of new generation, let's say incremental generation. And there is an upside potential in this region, in this part of the world, which means mostly developing and emerging economies, because their power demand is growing. And dynamic and stable markets, as we call it, one is growing, the other one is not growing, has other impacts in the competitiveness of renewable energy. So renewables are becoming more and more competitive in the energy scene. However, the dynamics are different. In dynamic markets, where there's a growing power demand, we basically see more and more that new onshore generation is competitive with fossil fuels. In Australia, Brazil, Chile, and South Africa, we see many cases where onshore wind is a preferred option. So this is good news because it gives a competitive side to renewables in this part of the world. In stable markets, the situation and competitiveness is defined differently, which means that onshore wind is also competitive in many markets with a good financing compared to CCGT plants. As you can see in the Germany case, we basically put together a graph showing the weighted average cost of capital in the horizontal axis and the cost of energy in the vertical axis. You see that the German onshore wind is competitive with CCGT plants at 6% weighted average cost of capital. However, this is good news, but at the same time, the orange line is the wholesale electricity market, which means it's around half of the average LCOEs. What does that mean? Which means that nothing is competitive actually in Europe, in this case in Germany. That's why we have right now a problem in Europe where basically investors do not want to invest in any kind of generation. Another reason is that Europe has kind of an overcapacity, which means that there is more generation that is needed after the addition of renewables, and old investment, conventional investments, are basically having a hard time to compete in the market. Obviously, competition and market conditions and policies dictate the investment levels, as you can see in this graph. So renewable investment has risen to high levels, especially as you can see it peaked in 2011. However, we expect this investment to decrease over the medium term, or level off, I will say, as you can see in the graph. So you can see the regions who are leading in investment. China has an incredible chunk, and we see that Europe's investment capacity is decreasing in renewables. And in 2013, we estimated total new asset investment in renewables around $250 billion. However, we expect this to decrease slightly through 2017 and pick up afterwards. And the leading regions are China, Africa is growing, Asia is growing, and non-OECD Americas, which means Latin America. And there are two trends that dictate this decreasing investment. One is good, one is bad. The the bad news is that increasing risks are expected to slow renewable growth, which means that we see more and more in the world policy risks that basically prevents investors to invest in those technologies. So you can see in this graph that in OECD, we see the annual new additions of renewable energy to level off more or less, which means that this market is not growing anymore. When we look at the other non-OECD, we see a growing trend. New additions are growing in this region, which is good news. And when we look at China, the big chunk, it's also kind of leveling off. China's renewable energy market is growing, but it depends on many factors. I'll talk about it later. But the main point in this slide is that it used to be a growing market, and renewables are becoming to face more risks from several regions that basically creates challenges for investors to invest in these technologies. The good news is that renewables investment costs are falling. So that's you can see in this graph in different regions of the world, the same regions, how different renewable energy technology and their costs are decreasing. We've seen an incredible improvement of solar PV over the last year. We divided them into solar PV residential and solar PV utility, but onshore wind costs are increasing as well. The only two technologies that the costs have not come down yet are offshore wind and solar thermal electricity, in other words CSP technologies. So one slide on one region and the global cumulative onshore wind capacity. This is how we see onshore wind capacity growing globally. And no doubt, China will be the largest wind market in the world, basically having around 40% of global capacity by 2020. And you see here that there are markets growing, and we expect that global capacity will increase from around 310 gigawatts in 2013 to 600 gigawatts in 2020. However, one footnote on this. This increase takes into account current policies and if current policies are in place. In other words, if we see worse policies and worse market management, we won't see this picture. Otherwise, we will see maybe a slowing market further. So we see growing markets, as I said, as China, Asia, Latin America, and Middle East, and stable and declining market, mostly Europe and North America. So we looked at the cumulative capacity, but this doesn't always give the right picture. So we also need to look at what will be added annually into the system. So we see different technologies and different annual additions, and we see that onshore wind is expected to lead the new capacity. Although solar PV has grown very fast over the few years, we still see the onshore technology to basically lead the annual additions, as the options for deployment of hydropower is decreasing due to environmental conditions and financing problems. However, these dynamics change per region to region. So we basically decreased our forecast compared to last year on onshore wind due to policy risks that I just mentioned. And we also decreased offshore wind capacity forecast as well. You see in these lines, in the figure, different regions with their annual additions. As you can realize, the line on the top is China, the red line, and we expect Chinese market to continue growing through 2015 and then basically leveling off at around 16 to 18 gigawatt a year installment. When you take into account that only 85 to 90% is connected to the grid, you will see around 14 megawatts net installed capacity connected to the grid. And the blue line is interesting. The blue line shows exactly what's going on in a market where there is an uncertainty over the policy implementation. This is based on the US. It includes Canada, US, that region. However, we see that US capacity is increasing and decreasing almost every 2-3 years due to the tax investment renewable problems. So, and we see in here as well that Europe's annual additions are slightly decreasing and leveling off afterwards. The growing market is rest of non-OECD, as wind technology is basically moving everywhere in the world. So let's look at a little bit Turkey through the lenses of making a comparison. So, as I said, Turkey is a dynamic market. I put together here a slide to compare Turkey with European markets in terms of the power demand growth. So the blue dots are the demand growth, and the red dots are basically the GDP growth. You see that in Europe, power demand is not increasing. However, Turkey is not in this picture. We expect Turkey's power demand to grow between 4 to 5% annually over the medium term. And basically, this puts Turkey not in this category of countries. As I said, Turkey is not a stable country in terms of power demand, and what kind of competitiveness will dictate the future of wind energy and other renewable technologies. Turkey actually, in terms of power demand, compares well with Latin American countries, some Asia emerging countries, and Eurasian countries. So this means that looking at Turkey through European perspective will not be enough to understand what kind of dynamics we expect. So there are several drivers that renewables will be invested. One driver is that a common challenge of these dynamic markets, they have kind of pollution problems and diversification needs. So they are basically getting a lot of energy from imported goods. And then this is a general trend. Of course, there are exceptions, but in these growing markets, energy dependency is an important driver to push for renewables. As you can see in Turkey, more than 50% of capacity renewable generation is produced by fossil fuels and imported fossil fuels. This holds true for many other similar countries that I mentioned. And as you can see in Turkey, we see a renewable energy growth on the right-hand side. We see different technologies are growing, mainly onshore and hydro additions and a little bit of solar power. However, the share of renewables on the right-hand side, this is the dotted line, as you can see, are not increasing in Turkey that much, because at the same time we expect Turkey to deploy more gas and coal. That's why it will level off renewable energy growth, I will say. So let's look at onshore wind and in Turkey and similar emerging markets. So we see on this graph, you will see how we see Turkey's deployment of renewables over the medium term. So what mainly dictates Turkey's deployment is how and when planned hydropower plants will be deployed, because majority of the capacity that we expect between 2013 or 2014 to 2017 is dependent on which hydropower plants will be deployed. It can be delayed, so we will push them back. However, right now, we see that those hydropower plants will come online in coming years. On the other hand, we see onshore wind, basically stable growth of onshore wind, around 500 to 800 megawatts, depending on the year, over the medium term. And the dotted line shows the overall investment that we expect to happen in Turkey. So we expect around 14 billion renewable investment between 2013 and 2020. This is cumulative. That line shows only annual investment. And 60% of this investment will come from onshore wind, as we expect. So let's look at actually with which countries we can compare Turkey. So I'll put Turkey in the category of Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Romania, South Africa, and Egypt. Both in terms of their capacity installed in 2005, which is close to zero, which means they don't have a lot of experience. And looking at the ramp up in the capacity, taking South Africa as an exception, it looks similar to these countries in my opinion. At the same time, in terms of the high power electricity prices, in terms of the growing demand, and in terms of the market structure. So this means that we can compare Turkey with those countries. And we see that those countries, the investment in those countries will increase significantly over the medium term, however, depending on the policy structure that they have. So let's look at what is going to drive this investment. Of course, we have to look at costs. What are the investment costs? What are the levelized cost of energy that will dictate this investment? So we made a comparative study of investment costs, and we basically projected them over the medium term to see how renewable energy technology costs will decrease. So you can see on the left-hand side different regions and what are the costs in these regions. So we see that the lowest investment cost right now on onshore wind is in China and India. Actually, according to our data, costs in India are right now a little bit lower than China. But however, we see a lot of differences in terms of costs. You can see that costs can actually double in Japan for the same capacity installed. And the other countries like Brazil, US, and Germany are in between the two. So we assume that, I don't know exactly the prices in Turkey. However, I assume that Turkey is between China and Germany, kind of closer to Germany, I will say. I think investors can give a better idea about this. However, investment costs are not enough to look at the picture. We have to look at the right-hand side as well, which means that levelized cost of electricity. This is the levelized cost of electricity ranges that we see over the medium term. Basically, there's a spike in 2009 because of the commodity prices of wind turbines. That's why we see a slight increase. And then we expect stable decrease in levelized cost of energy for onshore wind. However, these are typical systems. There are also lower costs that are achieved in Brazil and the United States, as you can see with the blue dots and border dots. We can see that really low costs are achieved. Please look at the data in terms of US dollars, not euros. So which means that the cost that you see is around $40 per megawatt hour, which is around 35 euros. So these costs, these are signed contracts in the United States and Brazil. So with good financing and with high capacity factors, these costs are achieved right now in the world. Again, we see Turkey in between Brazil and Germany, maybe lower than Germany in terms of costs, but definitely higher than Brazil. One slide on offshore. I know it's not really relevant on Turkey, but it's important to note, maybe in the future. Onshore wind costs are expected to decrease. However, there are ambitious cost decrease targets are set in Europe and both companies and governments, so I don't know if we will see that decrease, but currently the costs are almost tripling the onshore wind investment costs. No expected offshore projects in Turkey by 2020, according to us. So if these costs are decreasing and wind turbines, as we say, are becoming like commodities, can we actually say that financing matters? I think even now with differences, financing matters. You can see different weighted average cost of capital in different countries for typical onshore projects. Of course, these numbers will change per company, per country, per project. but we would like to show how these differences actually create problems, or let's say challenges or opportunities for different countries. We observe still the lowest financing is coming from Germany. However, Brazil is competing with Germany because of the development bank's involvement. And I don't have financing data on Turkey. I would love to present it if people can help me on this. But I think Turkey is on the high side. So in order to summarize the financing challenges, you will see a lowest investment cost in India, however, with the highest financing cost. So what will happen is that even though you have lowest investment cost and one of the highest financing costs, which means that weighted average cost of capital, Indian projects actually will become expensive due to financing issues. The same thing for China. Although Chinese development banks are helping a lot of companies to provide them cheap loans, still on average we see China financing costs similar to US. Last slide on the overall summary. So we would like to say that this a little bit of pessimistic picture in terms of renewable energy capacity leveling off is basically in the hands of policymakers. So if policy risks are met, investments will continue because the technology is developing, especially onshore investments will continue. And we say everywhere the same thing, policies must be predictable and retroactive changes must be avoided, which means that as much uncertainty you add into your policy making, less investment you will see because investments will go elsewhere. Believe me, there are markets with 45 to 50% capacity factors on onshore, and they will go there. And if Brazilian Development Bank is increasing, is providing a 5% overall financing cost, they will go there with 49% capacity factors. So it's actually, Turkey needs to look at itself if it can mitigate those risks in order to attract investment, basically. And another point is that renewables don't need high levels of support anymore. They don't need, maybe in many cases, feed-in tariffs. They don't need incentives, basically subsidies that will distort the market. But what they need is a market framework that they can compete and their value is remunerated in the market. That's the most important thing that people should expect. The one additional thing that we added today is that we see that in countries where policy uncertainty is very high and retroactive changes are made, example, India, example, Spain, example, Romania. In these countries, what you see is that you see boom and bust cycles where you put an investment, everybody rushes to invest, and then 1 or 2 years later, you will see zero investment. This is what's happening in around 5 to 10 countries in the world over the last few years. So, and these politicians go elsewhere to talk about that renewables are very expensive and then no one should invest in renewables. This happened between Spain and Mexico. This happened between Romania and Brazil and so on and so forth. So high-level politicians go and say that don't invest in renewables to the policymakers of the other country who will basically start a market. So in my opinion, there should be a positive view in order for the renewables to be deployed. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for this enlightening presentation and the facts and figures you're providing us with. I think it is of particular interest to see the close link between the policy risk on the one hand and the cost of finance on the other. And this in a global situation where financial markets are really swamped with liquidity and look for safe havens to invest into. So this is the big message to the policymakers. You can actually give this liquidity a safe haven for investment, provided you give us stable regulatory frameworks. And for all those who are interested in the figures and facts that you've given us, I think the presentation will be made available. And I'd just like to draw your attention to the Global Wind Energy Outlook that we've published as Global Wind Energy Council a fortnight ago in Beijing, where we use as one of the scenarios we presented there the basic assumptions that just have been presented to us from the IEA, going as far as 2050. So thank you very much again, and we will have time for questions at the end of the sessions, I hope. So the next speaker I'd like to introduce to you is our colleague Dorothea Delbruck. She is German-born, completed a Master of Science degree in 2001, started to work in the wind energy sector in 2003. She's been working at Nordex since 2007 as responsible person for sales in Turkey and Greece. And in August 2010, she was appointed as Southern Europe, Africa and Middle East sales manager here in this beautiful city of Istanbul. Dorothea, you have the floor.
So thank you very much for your short introductory words. It is a pleasure for me as well to again today share with you some thoughts for the second time. As last year I also had the opportunity to present some thoughts about the role of the Turkish wind energy market in the EMEA region. Let me add some words to the short introduction of my person. I have been responsible for doing business in Turkey since quite a long time, and this started even before 2007 when I started to work in Nordex as the responsible Turkey sales manager. It started actually in 2005, and therefore I have now lived through nearly 10 years of evolution of the Turkish wind power market up to date. Before going into the subject matter, let me give you some updated facts and figures about the company Nordex as well, where we stand as of today and where we are, why Turkey is an important market for Nordex. We are a global manufacturer of wind turbines and have several regions and important markets in the world. We are currently a profitably growing company which is expecting to have a turnover of approximately 1.5 billion in the year 2014. Thereby we are focusing on our multi-megawatt wind turbines, which are sold in the range between 2.4 and 3.3 megawatt capacity. The main growth driver at the moment is thereby our N117 product, which is available as a 2.4 and as a 3 megawatt turbine and makes approximately 50% of our current orders. These two platforms are successfully sold in approximately 21 focus markets where we are established with local subsidiaries, as we are here in Turkey as well. In these focus market, we are always strong with a prominent market share, and one of the backbones of our current sales success is obviously the Turkish market, where we have a substantial market share. The success story of Nordex in Turkey is tightly connected to the success story of the Turkish wind energy market. We started the installation of our first wind energy project in Turkey in the year 2007, which reportedly also was the year where a substantial growth occurred in the market for the first time. What triggered this growth at that time, and we discussed this earlier, at that time it was a feed-in tariff. It was established by the Turkish government through a revision of the renewable energy law, which was connected to the euro exchange rate at that time and triggered the bankability of wind energy projects and brought into the grid at a growth rate of approximately 100 to 300 megawatts from 2007 onwards wind energy capacity. In that time, also Nordex was able to secure its first orders and directly started the establishment of a local entity which was successfully incorporated in the year 2009. Right from the beginning, our success strategy was to set up a strong local service network and to create local expertise to support our local operational business. And this is nowadays supported with over 100 employees which are employed by Nordex in Turkey and which take care of the operational activities and the administrative activities inside the country. About 50% of our employees are taking care of the existing fleet of approximately 850 megawatts as of today. Further employees are working in the erection of the future additions, are preparing the contracts for further growth in the country, and administrative functions such as health safety, quality assurance, accounting, HR, local engineering support, and even purchasing are supporting these activities. What have been further growth drivers for wind energy in Turkey? We have heard this also from Jaime in his presentation just now. It was not only the feed-in tariff system that was established at that time, actually at a very comparably at that time rather low rate of approximately 5.5 euro cents, which was at that time even lower than the market price for energy. It was additionally, of course, a growing economy, a great potential for energy, for wind energy, and the support on renewables were further growth driving factors, as well as the well-established infrastructure within the country and the ready electrical transmission lines that could absorb this power. Nowadays, we are looking at a growth rate of approximately 500 megawatt per year, and we hope that this installation number will hopefully be superseded this year even more. We have seen these slides before, and here we see actually Turkey's position in the top 20 wind energy markets in 2012, where Turkey obviously has a position. And as my colleague Jaime just presented previously, it is a growing market with already in 2012 good basis of wind energy installation and further growth which is happening. We do have mega markets such as China and US, which do reach incredible growth rates per year and installations, megawatt installations, but of course this is market specific because the countries are huge and and can absorb that amount of electricity easily. Then of course we have in the top ranks also the traditional wind energy countries such as Germany, Spain, India, Denmark, who are deploying wind energy since a long time. In the uprising markets, Turkey has a very firm position. And we see this very clearly on my next slide, which shows the potential of the wind energy market in Turkey until the year 2023, which is therefore looking at a slightly different time frame than the numbers presented by Jaime just recently, and looking more at the overall potential. Turkey here has an outstanding role, showing a potential of 12 gigawatt with a growth rate. Other countries, it is shortly followed by France with a growth potential of another 9 gigawatt until 2023. But this number in comparison to Turkey is stability or even a small decline. Then we see some other very active markets in the regions, like in Southern Europe we have Italy, we have lower growing countries like Greece, and Portugal, Spain, and then we have some non-OECD countries which show very interesting growth rates as well in Northern Africa, South Africa, and partially also Middle East. For this potential to be realized, I totally agree with Jaime. It will be very important to have a stable policy environment in place. If you look at the current situation in the Turkish market, Turkey had approximately 11 gigawatt of licenses attributed to the different license holders in the year 2012. Currently, we have an installed number of projects of 3.5 gigawatt, which means we have a gap of approximately 8 gigawatt of projects which are actually licensed but could not enter into construction phase yet. This leads to a frustration on the side of the investors as well as on the side of the bureaucrats. And this frustration has been discussed in the last days, and I followed yesterday the discussions between the representatives of the Turkish government and the Danish counterparts and the investors as well, where this was very often mentioned from both sides, from their different perspectives. Several times it has been mentioned by the policymakers how important it will be for Turkey to become an established production hub in the global wind energy market. If you look at the current situation of this, we of course see that the huge mega markets like China and US do have their own production capacity. We also see in the countries like Germany, Denmark and Spain and India, which are deploying wind energy since a long time, they also have own production, wind turbine production inside their country. And then we look at some upcoming markets which are successfully also establishing their own production facilities inside the country. And Turkey belongs to this country which has been successfully able to already attract wind turbine component production into the country. We are able to nowadays source in Turkey wind turbine towers, anchor cages and blades. Of course, we are able to source the complete electrical and civil infrastructure which is needed to the establishment of the products. This leads to a situation that a wind energy project delivered with these local components as of today would already contribute to a local added value of approximately 60% of the complete investment, whereas only 40% remain to be imported. Let me shortly give you the example of our business partner and sub-supplier, TPI, who has, in conjunction with us, decided into the investment of a blade production plant in Izmir, Turkey, where this company has been prepared for the production of rotor blades in the year 2013, started its serious production in the beginning of this year, and up to now, for Nordex has produced 70 rotor blade sets, which have been deployed in Turkey and also in our export markets, Europe, in Latin America, and other markets, and thereby nowadays is already deploying 1,000 employees. Such an investment, of course, has to be a long-term investment, and it is of course required by a manufacturer or by any company to make such an investment to have a stable market and to have an outlook on which a business plan can be made upon. How do we as Nordics see the role of the Turkish market? For us, Turkey is a center. It represents approximately 15% of our business volume. We expect to erect around 100 turbines next year in Turkey. We are already sourcing blades, towers and anchor cages locally in the market, and we have built up a substantial local expertise which is supporting not only the business in Turkey directly but also in some upcoming neighboring markets, and which we do hope to do so also in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. One of the most important players in the Turkish wind energy market, Nordex, is continued there to stay and to expand its business. Good to see, good to know, and good luck to you. And we'll have time for questions, as I said, at the end of the session. So the next presentation is about Pakistan wind power project. Our speaker is Yagmur Özdemir. He graduated from Eastern Mediterranean University, Department of Economics in the year 2000. He received his master's degree in business law from Bilgi University and completed the executive MBA in British law postgraduate programs at the University of Karachi. Mr. Özdemir began his professional career as an auditor at Arthur Andersen in 2000, and from 2002 to 2004 he worked at Ernst & Young, and between 2004 and 2007 he served as financial controller at Vestal Electronics. He joined Zorlu Energy Electric Generation Company in 2007 as project finance manager. In 2012 he was promoted to manager of investments and project finance at the same company, and he has been serving as assistant general manager responsible for investments and project finance since October 2012. Please, Mr. Özdemir, you have the floor.
Thank you for coming to this lovely organization, and thank you for TWEC to make this organization every year and give us a chance to give our opinions to the people who loves wind energy, who loves renewable energy. Today, I want to give you brief information, or I want to give you the history of our Pakistani project. Rather than Turkey, today we will talk about Pakistan and our history in Pakistan. You know, it is a long story. The Pakistani story of our company starts in 2006. I don't really know how I will give this story in 15 minutes, you know, because it takes our 8 years to establish the wind farm in Pakistan, but I will try to explain again how we established, how we achieved this project. As Zorlu Energy, I don't want to give long information about us, what we are doing in Turkey. We have wind farms, we have geothermal facilities in Turkey, hydro facilities. Now I want to give brief information about Pakistan. As Zorlu Energy, now we are operating a wind farm in Pakistan, which is 44.6 megawatts, and we have a license up to 300 megawatts. If everything goes well, we are planning to establish another 100 megawatts in a 1 year time period. As Zorlu Energy, we are operating in 3 companies in Pakistan, as Zorlu Energy Pakistan, Zorlu Industrial Pakistan, and Zorlu O&M Pakistan. This is important why we are making our own operation and maintenance in Pakistan, and also we are making our own EPC operations in Pakistan. As I said, we start this project in year 2007, then we start generating first megawatts in 2009, but unfortunately, because of the economical crisis in 2008, we made a little bit, how can I say, pause the project, and then we start again in 2010, and now as of July 2013, we make the COD, and we are giving the first generation, first megawatts of electricity to the grid. This is another small brief about our project. We made, as I said, we made the COD in July 2013. It is in the Jampir area in Pakistan, in Tata. This is the first wind farm in Pakistan. This is important again. And what we are using is, Vensis and Vestas turbines, combination of Vensis and Vestas turbines in Pakistan. Before I give you the market view of the Pakistan, I want to briefly talk about why we are making energy investments, why we are generating electricity, why we are in the energy business. Because energy is a really long cycle business. Every energy investor must understand the basics of the energy. We don't have any, how can I say, we must make these investments. As an investor, of course we are looking for the profit, but rather than the profit, we are making these investments for the benefit of the people, benefit of the countries. Because of this reason, while we are starting to make these projects, we must make the evaluation. We must understand the basics of the country, basics of the environment, basics of the sector, and basics of the concerns. Because of this reason, we must look at the details of each aspects in each country that we are planning to make the investments. The security, demand and supply, the affordable price of the energy, sustainable quality, environment-friendly operations, the importance of the low carbon emissions, intensity, availability. We must look at all these aspects while we are making the investment. But of course, rather than making an investment in your country, if you want to make an investment in a foreign country, rather than all these other aspects, we must look at these analyses. We must analyze the country, sector, project. We must look at all these aspects and make our decision. We must understand the political risks in the country, economical risks, stability. Of course, if today we are talking about the Middle East and Asia, we must look at the terrorism. This is an important issue in our region, unfortunately. Environmental issues, investment, climate, and then when we come to the sector, what is the need of the country? The country needs electricity or not? What is the demand and supply? What is the governmental policies? And at the end, the project analysis. Where is the site? Where is the project? The procedures, the other bankabilities are reasonable or not. And then when the investors in Pakistan, when the Pakistani government people come to our office, they start talking about their country. They start talking about what is the situation in Pakistan, what is going on, and then we start making these analyses. What is the situation in Pakistan at that time? There is a highly political risk in that country. Yes, there is a highly political risk in that country because the government was changing every 2 or 3 years time. But again, there is a government over there and there is a democracy over there. We take a check for the political risk. Then we start look at the social problems. Risk of the exchange rate, risk of the earthquakes, terrorism attacks, because we know that that in that country there is a terrorism. But I will tell you later. Then it becomes the project analysis because the site is very far away from the terrorist activities. Then we look at the strategic importance, logistic issues. We evaluate all these activities in the country in Pakistan. And then we look at the wind potential. The funny thing is that in year 2007, when we first went to Pakistan, there was no wind mast in Pakistan. But everybody knows that there is a wind in Pakistan, but there is no wind mast over there. Nobody puts any wind mast. Everybody knows that there is a wind corridor starts from the Arabian Sea, ends in India, but nobody knows that the real numbers. The first thing that we made is we put a wind mast in Pakistan and we start making the measurements in the country. Then we start looking at the demand and supply of the Pakistan. What we see is that the total production of the country is not enough for the generation. Imagine a country, after every 1 hour, there is a shutdown, and 2 hours no electricity. After 2 hours, another 1 hour for the electricity. Pakistani people live like in this situation, you know, for the several years' time. We understand that there is a need of energy over there, and what we evaluate over there is that the energy is, you know, producing from the oil, and they are not an oil producer company. They are buying the oil from the outside of the Pakistan, and the cost of the electricity is too high. Then we start looking at the cost of outages, and what we say is that the first thing we said is that the most expensive energy is the energy that you don't have. Because of this reason, we start, as I said, working on the wind mast, and we put the wind mast. We start talking with the Pakistani government. We start making the policies together with the Pakistani government. We start making the power purchase agreements. We start making the grid codes and the other stuff. We start working with the Pakistani government to evaluate, to solve all these problems. And then we start looking at the sector analysis, as I said. And what we see is that, you know, over 55 million people, which is the 31% of the population, has no access to the electricity in Pakistan. And then, you know, community renewable energy investment is there is no standardized agreements available upfront. There is nothing over there, but we start working together with the Pakistani government, and we made this flow chart. Pakistani government established AEDB, which is Alternative Energy Development Board. This is for any investors who want to make the energy investment for the renewable energy side. And then, you know, they established the NEPRA, which is regulatory organization which gives the tariff, and NTDC is the organization which buys the energy. And then, you know, we start talking with the lenders, which is very important. We talk with the IFC, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank to make the financing together. And together with all these institutions, AEDB, NEPRA, NTDC, and the financial institutions, we make the financial closing. We raise the money, we finalize all the agreements, we made all necessity issues, we solve all these problems, and we make the financial and start the construction. And as I said, when we look at the project analysis at the end, how we solve all these problems, we make the US dollar Euro Pak Rupee exchange rate covered power purchase agreement. We made a long-term power purchase agreement which covers the implementation agreement of the Pakistani government for 20 years. And as I said, because there is no wind data, but everybody knows that there is a wind over there, we put a clause in the power purchase agreement which covers the wind risk. Because there is no wind data, they cover the wind risk, they also cover the wind risk. They said that if there is no risk, no wind, we will also pay you the money or something, but now we know that there is wind, and our wind farm is, you know, working maybe 10% more than the expected number. And we start the project, and after 7 years, as I said, we finalize the project, and we start now generating electricity in Pakistan. And now we are very happy that we are in Pakistan, we are making investment in Pakistan, and as I said, we are now planning to make another 100 megawatts in Pakistan. I think I talk all about this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think we've learned something very interesting about entering this very challenging market, Pakistan. And I must admit, this is the first time ever I've heard about a guarantee given by the government about the variability of the wind resource. That is extraordinary indeed, but it says that obviously the government is fully aware of the risk of the investment and therefore is giving extra kind of guarantees in that respect. Yeah?
Actually, as I said, the reason why they give the wind guarantee is that really they know that there is a wind in the country. And at the end of this wind corridor, starting from the Arabian Sea, ends in India, there is almost 1,000 megawatts of wind farms working in India. But because they don't have the wind data, because they don't prove that they have the wind, they give this wind guarantee. And to make the projects bankable, they must give this wind guarantee.
Yeah.
But now, unfortunately, if anyone wants to make investment in Pakistan, now they are not giving this guarantee because they have the data. They give this guarantee only for the 5 projects, and after these 5 projects, now they are not giving this wind guarantee.
So there is a first mover advantage there. Thank you very much again. So our last speaker this morning has a different angle altogether from the project developer RES. I'd like to introduce you to Julian Horn. Julian has 17 years experience in the energy industry and for the last 4 years has had a leading role in developing RES's Anatoli's portfolio of wind and solar plants in Turkey. He came to RES from Falk Renewables, an Italian renewable energy company, where he was responsible for developing and financing wind farms in the UK, Turkey and Poland. Prior to that, Julian worked at Société Générale on oil, gas and petrochemical projects financing in Europe and the Middle East. Please, Julian, you have the floor.
Good morning. My name is Julian Horn. As mentioned, I work for RES, an international renewable energy developer. We've developed and built 7,000 megawatts of wind farms and solar plants globally. In Turkey, we have obtained over 200 megawatts of wind licenses, and we have 19 people here in Istanbul in an office developing a portfolio of wind and solar projects. So my presentation today is called Turkey, the Place to Be? It's a question that me as a wind energy developer get asked often by our board. How does Turkey compare to the region? Is it the place to put your money? Well, if you had $100 million to invest in a wind farm, where would you choose? Which country would you go to? What would you look for in a wind energy market? Well, there's a few key points that you look for in a market before you go there. You want the country to be stable. You want to have enough space to put your wind farms, because wind energy does require a lot of space. You need the market to be quite deep, so at least 10 gigawatts of total consumption of the population. And importantly, either your wind power must be at grid parity, or if the wind power is not at grid parity with wholesale power prices, you need to see a willingness from the government to pay for the wind power, or the government to be rich enough to pay for it, to pay a premium for green energy. So what I'd like to do with you is just take a tour around the Mediterranean region and just look at how Turkey compares to the other markets. So here's the map. And if you'll allow me, let's start at Morocco. And we'll work our way around anti-clockwise up to the UK, and just to talk through each market and see how they compare. So first of all, Morocco, the government has an installed capacity, a target of 2 gigawatts of wind power. There are 1.9 gigawatts already of projects built or allocated to be built. So for me as a developer, there's already a question mark over that country. Next one along, Algeria. They have a renewables policy in place, but they have so much gas, I don't for a minute believe that renewables will ever be at grid parity there. So I'm not going there. Tunisia, just coming out of its Arab Spring. Really, it's a few years too early to go there yet. Libya? No. Egypt. Now, Egypt has a massive population, 80 million, a chronic need for electricity, but the government's rated B-, and they insist on having a system with PPAs, so the question mark there is, will you get paid for the power you produce? So a big question mark over going to Egypt. Working our way around, Saudi Arabia. There was a huge announcement in 2013. They plan to have 54 gigawatts of renewables by 2032. So the announcement was made with great fanfare in April 2013. And since then, nothing. The government has not been able to deliver on a program that it promised. So we're still waiting and waiting for something to happen in Saudi Arabia. Iraq, no, not going there. Israel, well, Israel has basically canned wind energy, and they're opting for solar, so we can't go there. Syria, of course, no. Last year, I was trying to push Ukraine, but that's gone by the wayside now. Bulgaria and Romania just had their retroactive cuts on wind and solar, so looking highly risky places to invest at the moment. Greece has a huge queue for grid capacity, and of course, coming out of its sovereign debt crisis, so a big question mark about its ability to pay. Italy. Well, Italy's not the place to go today. You need to be in Italy 7 years ago. The country is already full of the great spots of wind power. All the windy spots have gone, and they have a long queue for grid capacity too. So if you're going to put your money today, you're too late in Italy. Spain and Portugal, well, they're shut now. I mean, they've stopped paying for wind power effectively, or reneged on some of their promises. France is having a quarrel with the European Commission about its energy tariff, about whether the tariff is a subsidy or not. And the projects there are getting smaller and smaller and going to less and less windy sites. So it's a difficult market. It's a market we're in, but it's by far from easy. Germany, well, it's a huge market, biggest market, but already pretty saturated, and you'd be lucky to find a project which is more than 5.5 meters a second, and you need to put in very high towers now, very expensive projects to get projects off the ground. Poland, well, that's still in the mix with its green certificate system being rethought and rejigged, and also there's a long queue for the grid. And then to the UK, which is my home country, one of the Conservative Party there made an announcement saying if they win the next election, then they'll stop all onshore wind energy. So as you see, Turkey's context in the region, there are problems outside Turkey too. And so in comparison, Turkey looks like the El Dorado of wind energy. You have a huge population here, 60 gigawatts of national consumption of power. Consumption is 1/2 per capita of what it is in the EU 28 countries, so there's plenty of room to grow. You have a stable government, a transparent energy sector, which is very easy to see how the system works. Very clear grid tenders. Wind power is at grid parity. Fantastic. It's not in many countries to the west of Turkey. So we're not relying on government subsidy here. You have some great construction companies in Turkey, some world-leading construction companies. And also you have lots of space. There's lots of space still to develop wind farms in Turkey. So surely Turkey is the best place to be. Surely you're installing 2 gigawatts per year here. Surely there are hundreds of international investors coming here. Surely there's been lots of non-recourse financings here. Oh no, it's 600 megawatts a year. There's only a handful of international investors. And as far as I know, there's only been one non-recourse project financing in the country. So in my opinion, Turkey is firing on one cylinder. It's not using its full potential of where it could be and should be in comparison to its neighbors. It's in a great position. The problem, I think, is that the system, the licensing system in Turkey, I think is back to front. The problem is grid capacity is being handed out to projects which can't be built. It's being handed out, grid capacity is being handed out too early, and you can't build a wind farm unless you have grid capacity. Grid capacity in Turkey is being handed out to projects which are next to radars. Grid capacity is being allocated to projects in bird migration routes. It's being allocated to projects which have problems with mining licenses. It's being handed out to projects which can't be built too early. From my perspective, just an idea, how about if the authorities handed out the grid capacity only after all of these problems are sorted out on a project? That a project can't even enter a grid auction, a grid tender, until it has all these permits in place. It would solve many problems for EPDK. It would only allow the true investors to come in. And you can then get a true picture of the advanced status of the wind sector. But before I'm too harsh on Turkey, let's just go and compare how allocation of grid capacity works in other countries. And I confess it's not much better. I'll take my own country. The system there to get grid capacity, it's a queue. So the first person that applies gets grid capacity. And as a result, often, if you go to the grid operator and say, can I have grid capacity? He says, sure, fine, in 7 years' time. Italy has the similar problem with a long queue. There have been a couple of countries which are better. France, in particular, has a much better system. You don't get allocated grid capacity in France until you have all of your permits in place. So therefore, there is no grid queuing in France, and it's rarely an issue. Grid capacity is rarely an issue in France. To the east of Turkey and the other countries, we have another set of problems with the system there. And the problem there is that the governments in these countries are trying to centralize the development of wind energy. They try to control everything and pre-develop projects as if a wind project was a nuclear power plant or a gas-fired power plant. They try to pre-package the sites, and the government is trying to play wind farm developer. And then they'll have an auction, and then the lowest price will win the site. But the problem is that governments are not good wind energy developers. And after a few years, the governments in these countries realize that actually they're not good at acquiring land or measuring wind or dealing with the grid problems. And you get many years of delays in those countries as well. I'm thinking particularly Saudi Arabia, and Egypt is also trying to control every step of wind farm development and centralize development of wind sites. So in conclusion, back to my first question, is Turkey the place to be? Definitely. It's a wonderful place for wind farm development. There are some changes needed in the system to unlock a huge, huge capacity of wind power that should be here, because wind power is at grid parity, which is quite extraordinary from many other countries you see. But it has some way to go from getting from a good market to an absolutely great market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julian. You had a good title to your presentation that is, I think, an opening to a discussion with all our speakers now. Is Turkey the place to be? I mean, you're all in Turkey, so obviously it is a place to be and a place to go. But just let me open the discussion with the panelists here with one question I'd like to ask each individual one of them. That is, given the chance to address the government of Turkey at the highest political level possible, what is it that you would ask for if you have one wish free and can address the government official saying, how do you get the Turkish market really started? Would you like to start, please? Yeah, ladies first.
One wish only?
One wish only, yes. It's not Christmas yet.
Okay. Sincerely speaking, I think that at the moment the biggest hurdle is for sure the problems that Julian also mentioned. The permitting process needs to be aligned to exploit the potential of the wind energy in Turkey. It will be necessary to bring online a substantial amount of licenses from pre-license to construction phase. And this is where at the moment there is a hurdle, because many licenses are given out, but they do not reach to construction phase, as Mr. Horn also explained, mainly due to hurdles in the permitting process.
Okay, thank you. Jaime, what would you say?
I think permitting and licensing is the major problem, but there are examples in the world where this has been a problem and it was resolved, and it's just a committee that several countries established to put together all the players in one room and start an official negotiation among them, because it's kind of a negotiation between different organizations which have different perceptions. So they did this in one country, I'm not going to give the name, and once they invited all the people in the room, there were around 50 people or 60 people, 80% of them have not seen each other before. So they don't know each other because they are working in different parts of the government to give permits. So
yeah.
I will say that it's kind of a committee that will put things together.
One very concrete proposal. Thank you. Jagmo, what would you advise the government to do?
Of course, the licensing and permitting, but I want to get attention to another part, the financing part, because Jaime Bey and also Julian mentioned these issues a little bit. You know, in Turkey right now, unfortunately, we are not making non-recourse. We cannot make non-recourse financing. The main problems, one of the main problems is the financing, right? Because Jaime Bey mentioned that I think 14 billion US dollars needed to achieve the 2020 targets. But to achieve 2020 targets, if we make these projects right like today with a course project finance, with the limited recourse financing, how can we find the equity? How can Turkish firms find this equity, or how can the investors find this equity? You know, Julian asks, if you have 100 million US dollars, if you have 100 million US dollars right now in Turkey, you can only make 2 projects with today's financing structure. But we must also solve this, you know, financing structure, and to solve this financing structure, the main problem is to make non-recourse project finance in Turkey, and to make the non-recourse project financing, we must solve this long-term price mechanism.
Thank you. So you're saying there is no project finance in Turkey yet, and that is a clear indication that the market is not mature. Julian, what would you advise the government to do?
Yeah, if you'd asked me the question 2 years ago or 3 years ago, as a developer, I would probably have moaned and said, please give us more money, give us a longer feed-in tariff with a higher feed-in tariff. But that's not what I'd ask for now. I'd ask for what I was mentioning in my presentation. There's 2 precious things that the government owns. One is grid capacity, and the other is publicly owned land. And it needs to be very, very careful about how it allocates these things, and not to allocate them too early. The way it's trying to do it at the moment is to put some hurdles in place with lots of bonds and share capital and requirements. You have to put in a met mast and measure the wind for a year. It's fine, but you still end up with projects that can't be built. All I would ask is just to try and flip the system round so that you don't give out these things, the public land and the grid capacity, until developers have got all the permits for these sites. And I think it would fix the system pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. Just let's go back for one minute to the issue of proper project financing being made available here in this country. You mentioned that. What you would just like to see as a change in the way finance is being handled to make project finance available? What is essential for that?
Well, I've been trying to do a project finance this year, and I think it is possible to do a non-recourse project finance. The feed-in tariff is really important as a floor, so the banks look at that as a safety net. It would help if it was a few more years longer, say 13, 14 years, but we can live with it. The Turkish banks don't like doing non-recourse finance because they're worried about the construction risk, because they've had their fingers burnt in hydro projects, I think. We need continued years of clear permitting process, which I do see in Turkey. I think it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. The international banks, they're actually okay with the construction period. It's the repayment period of the loan, which they don't like, and taking merchant risk. So if you want to get an international bank to lend in Turkey, you need to get probably an export credit agency to take the risk. And then on top of all those, you have this deadline of the end of the construction period, which is a cliff edge. If your project is not built by then you could have your project cancelled. And no lawyer can write to the bank and say, the project's safe in case there's a delay. So there's a combination of reasons as to why there isn't much project finance. And I think some changes, maybe being more flexible on the timing of projects once they're in construction, would help. The other reason why I think there is not much project financing here is because a lot of the companies have large balance sheets so far and have not needed project finance and can live without it. But I think we're getting to the end of that phase. If you want to get finance coming in from Western Europe, this project finance is the rocket fuel which drives most renewables in Europe. You're going to need to change the system to help them come in.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments to that? Yes, please, Jaime.
Actually, I have a question. What would be the simplest thing to do if the government changed the formula of, let's say, feed-in tariff, which is not almost used because the wholesale prices are higher, and change the formula and say that, okay, we look at the last year's average price, and we take this as a base, which will change every year, but at least it's a higher base than feed-in tariff. Will it be easier for banks to lend in this case, or will it be the same uncertainty level?
Well, we're looking for 15-year loans, so it wouldn't help, I don't think, because the bank needs to look out that far.
Okay, the thing is, I mean, basically you could establish wind energy projects as an asset class if you talk to those people who are involved in the decision-making in the finance world, because we have a long-standing experience. Given long-term power purchase agreements, there is no risk involved in that, if you know that. But this asset class hasn't been established yet, and I always wonder what we can do from the wind energy community, all those involved in different markets, to speed up the learning curve to the financing world that is always locally attached to the projects, how to best assess that asset class properly. I haven't come to terms with that yet, but I think this is a role that, say, the industry, come government, need to play in order to address this issue properly. I mean, no banker would give you his certain covenants. I mean, this is his or her business model, so they would give that away. But to talk about the experience that we've gained globally over the last 25 years is, I think, something that needs to be done. And I would just advise that at any given time, in a place like this city here, we should have round tables, closed doors, and talk about the experience of all those who've been involved in the international wind development for the last 10, 20 years, and talk about the asset class of wind projects. I think that would, in that respect, maybe help. If we can talk about it openly, that is. Okay, so that was kind of the internal debate here from the distinguished panelists. Please, I invite you all to raise your hands and put questions or comment on the presentations. Then please give your name and then ask your question.
İsmim Zafer Macit.
My name is Zafer Macit. My question is for Julien. Biraz bekleyebilir mi? Kulaklığını takmadı efendim. In UK, in the onshore, you explained that onshore investments is going to be stopped. What is the reason behind that?
The question is whether you could explain why a new conservative government in the UK, coming the May 2015 election, would stop onshore development altogether.
The problem in my country is that there's a strong anti-wind lobby. Many people don't like the look of wind turbines, and many people do, but there's a lobby that doesn't. And they think they may win some votes by saying that they would block wind in the UK onshore. One of the problems you don't have in Turkey is the chronic lack of space in the UK. It's a very, very dense population, especially in the southeast. And it's not a problem you have to worry about in many of the vast spaces in Turkey.
Thank you very much. So for all those who ask you the question, is the UK the place to be for onshore wind energy, or is the UK using its full potential? The answer is no. Any other question? Any other comment? Yes, please. Take the microphone and introduce yourself, please.
Turkish, in my question. My question is in Turkish. I'm a student. I'm studying electrical engineering. I want to start a career in the wind industry. My uncle is working in the wind industry. My uncle was involved in a number of wind farm projects in Turkey. I was in the conference yesterday, and I was driving home back with my uncle. He told me something, and now I'm curious as a student. And this question goes to Yağmur Bey, but also an open question to the panel. In general, when doing a feasibility study of a wind project, they estimate the blade or the wing expiry date or usable year like 20 years. It can be used for 20 years. Is there any scientific study? What is the productive, usable years of a rotor blade?
Kanatları ne yapacağımızla ilgili bir çalışma yapmadık fizibiliteleri yaparken ama.
To be honest, we never thought about what we're going to do with the rotor blades after 20 years. But of course, they have a cost. 20 years is like a lifetime. We're trying to improve the lifetime of the blades and wings and everything. I think it will take longer than 20 years. But in our feasibilities, we don't have any projections going beyond 20 years. We are not adding any extra cost for those parts beyond 20 years.
Thea, would you like to comment?
Maybe as a manufacturer, of course, I would like to add some comments on that. The rotor blades are an equipment that is simulated in the loads that they will face during their lifetime. This is why the wind turbines are also certified for different wind conditions. That means low wind side projects, medium wind projects, and strong wind projects. And for all of them, you would use another technology, and you would design the components of the wind turbine, including the rotor blades, being suitable for sustaining the loads of a project which is grouped into one of these wind classes. And then additionally, this is also being tested in the design phase with dynamic and static tests, which manage to simulate the lifetime of a rotor blade within a 2 or 3 months period. I hope this contributes.
And I would just could add, I think the issue here is how is the quality of the after-sales service. And I think this is a big issue for every emerging wind economy. And I think the quality aspect, training, health and safety issues are issues that have been addressed at this conference and are well focused by the Turkish Wind Energy Association. Because, I mean, if you look at more mature wind countries, and I come from the north of Germany, the first installations there were put up in the late 80s, and I know of turbines that have been running for more than 25 or 26 or 27 years. And the bank I was working for that was financing wind energy projects at the early phase had estimated that by the 10th year of the operation of a wind turbine, you need to maybe reinvest 50% of the initial investment to get to the 20 and 25 years. That was an estimate way back in the 1990s, and I think this is no longer true. But my point here is just a good service quality guarantees more than 20 years of service operation of each individual wind turbine. So let's look at getting people like you well-trained and get more people well-trained to look after those turbines, to keep them running. Any other question, comment? Yes, please. State your name and ask your question.
Hello. Çevre ve Türkiye'de çevre.
Hi, I studied civil engineering and environmental engineering in Turkey. I served in industry for 20 years. I first worked at the ministry for 7 years, and then I was in the private industry. And now I have my own company. We are designing and coordinating projects. My question is, there is a number of wind farm projects in Turkey, and once in one of our projects we had a court case. In the court, the mining companies claimed that the wind projects are damaging the best interests of the mine owners. They asked for expert opinion. There were several engineers and there were different professors of the universities as expert witnesses. One of them was for the claim was wind turbines were generating magnetic pollution and damaging the environment. We had a court case, and the court case is going on. Do you have any advice to help us? And a second question. In Turkey, in my opinion, my humble opinion, a lot of projects are up on the hills and mountains. I've been to France and Germany. You're lucky, you're fortunate to have a nice plain area from Berlin to Leipzig. It's just plain ground. In Turkey, they don't want us to be in the plain field because they say they are farming areas. But I mean, I have 2 degrees. I am an environmental engineer and also a civil engineer. I'm not an anti-wind person, but right now I am in the court and I need your support. Thank you.
Who is willing to answer this rather demanding question about environmental impact assessments and court cases? Any volunteer here? The only thing I can advise you to do is, because there is data available about court cases and environmental issues that have been brought forward by, how should I put it, interested parties who are fighting wind energy developments. And you're free to, I think, via the Turkish Association or the Global Wind Energy Council, the European Wind Energy Association, to approach us so that we can give you more information, what others already have learned in respect of those issues. Any other comments there? Please, Dorothea.
Yeah, also from my side, I could not right now provide you with a detailed answer on magnetic effects of wind turbines on mining areas, but I would really be happy to take your question and see what kind of materials we can supply to you in order to bring a little bit of clarity into this claim.
Yeah, and with respect to the use of land for farming, I think there is hardly any better way for farmers to invest and to diversify their investment, not just raising cattle or growing wheat or what have you, is to invest into wind. And a large majority of projects that you see globally is farmers jointly investing into wind projects, thereby kind of stabilizing their sources of income. So this is a new way and means of investment in local and rural areas. So I don't see a conflict of interest there. It is an ideal way of looking at things if you can join forces. Any other comments? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Zubair. I'm a trader and financial analyst, and I have a question for you. You all said your expectations from the government, but I look at the situation from different perspective. Turkish government has plans for making Istanbul one of the financial centers, best financial centers in the region. So, what do you expect from the government in the energy context to make Istanbul one of the best financial centers or the best in the region? I mean, what do you expect from the government to give as subsidiaries or, yeah, those kind of stuff? Thanks.
Thank you. That question goes, well, Julian?
As I mentioned, we're not asking for money. We're just asking for the licenses to be given out to the right people at the right time. You can't build a wind farm, you can't invest in a wind farm unless you have a license. But if there are no licenses to be handed out because they're all being blocked by projects which can't be built, then you can't invest.
I think there's nothing to add. This is the clarity, the certainty of good governance that we are asking for, nothing more and nothing less.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions, comments from the audience? Yes, please, Mustafa.
Katılımcılardan özür diliyorum.
My apologies from the participants. This might be a repeat feedback, but my question is to Heymi Bahar. He might already told about it, but I missed your presentation, and I'm curious to ask this question. In Turkey, for the wind industry, when compared to the Middle East or when compared to the Africa, what is the outlook of Turkish wind industry? And can you also compare the Turkey's position with Europe? And going forward, if Turkey continues investments, do you think Turkey can be a center of excellence and a hub to invest in the region, in the Middle East, in Central Asia and Africa? Thank you. Julian already answered, I believe, to most components of this question. But let me add on, expand to his presentation. In Turkey, given the current level of wind in Turkey is above the Middle East and Africa. That is right. But there's a lot of countries, like in South Africa, and in some Middle Eastern countries, the governments are holding an auction. I saw this in Brazil. In Mexico, I believe, an auction is coming. And they tackle with all the funding and financial security and stability questions. There's a lot of tested and proven solutions to this. But then this auction or tender, who tenders this, how they do it, and what are the terms and conditions? Say there's a tender in Turkey. You award the tender, the funding is there, everything is there. Then how are you planning to absorb this power into your grid? Turkey is not there yet. when compared to Europe, Europe is trying to solve its integration issues, as far as I'm concerned. If your penetration level is 2, 3, 4%, there's no problem at all. But if the penetration of wind is up to 15 to 20%, and I think Turkey has a good chance to increase the penetration up to 20%, then we need a proper flexibility and sustainability analysis for the Turkish market. That is my feedback. In conclusion, Turkey has a liberal market and experience. Turkey has a lot to teach, because the countries you mentioned in the region have a lot to learn from us. I have a further feedback. Turkey followed a different path, and South Africa is totally different. The story of South Africa is totally different than Turkey. We know that Turkey will not change its policies, and South Africa has its own policies. What happens if Turkish investors want to invest in South Africa or in the Middle East? My holding company, we are looking for investment opportunities in other countries. And it has to do with risk appetite. As far as I'm concerned, the British companies have a good risk appetite, and they are happy to invest in South Africa, but not sure if Turkish companies want to invest there. I understand the Turkish policies will not change, but in South Africa, 5 years ago, they had feed-in tariff, but there was zero investment, despite the feed-in tariff. And feed-in tariff was higher than the last 3 tenders in South Africa. So the investors are not looking for you to promise them money. It's a broader picture. It's how you fit everything in your policy. In South Africa, feed-in tariff didn't work 5 years ago because people had concerns about the connections with the grid company and everything, and people didn't want to invest. And then they changed their tendering system, then the story changed completely. Well, every country has its own pros and cons, but if you have a tender system, you absorb the volatility of the market, because it gives you an estimation for the next 15 to 20 years.
Adding to that, it is not just a matter of grid capacity, of a physical grid being available. It is a matter of access to the grid being guaranteed to you. And wherever you go, when you see there is non-discriminatory access to the grid made available, you see wind projects, you see independent power producers being able to get bankable projects off the ground. If you don't have that, and if it's still the old utility monopoly world of owning grid capacity and generating capacity simultaneously, you have doubts, because you know that every utility that holds its own generating capacity and owns the grid would always give preference to its own generating capacity, and thereby you might be discriminated when you are an independent power producer feeding into that grid, although you might have access to the grid, but you don't get the fair price and all the rest of it. So this issue, I think, is fundamental for opening up markets, to have what the Europeans call unbundling, a different business model for operating grids, a different business model for generating electricity. I think this is key for our industry, for the growth and the future of our industry. And I think the IEA and all the important players agree this is fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, this is fundamental, and however, it's not enough to basically attract projects. One recent example, Mexico. Start to unbundle their power system exactly how you explained. However, they put a policy which is green certificate system, which has been proven, neutral green certificate system, which has been proven that it hasn't worked in any of the countries that I know so far besides Sweden. It worked because the cost curve in Sweden for renewables and conventional technologies and all the others are the same because of the heating factor. But I mean, I was in Mexico a few months ago, and then they said that we want everything to be competitive. That's why we put green certificate system. Yes, but if you don't look at what happened in the world and go and copy and paste something that doesn't work, it's not going to work. What is going to happen? You basically remunerate fossil fuels, cogeneration gas power plants, and CO2 emissions will increase. You will not see much investment. Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, it's not enough to unbundle the project. It's also, you also need to realize the right policy for your country, analyzing everything.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving an example of how you still can continue discriminating if you want to, because this is policy making in its purest form. But energy markets are policy driven, as we all know, so we need to talk to the policy makers and say, okay, this is a test case. You have access to all the available information of best practices. This information is there. Why not make use of it? And then they can give you some reasons why. And it always will be said, okay, local conditions are different. And you must bear in mind that we are Turkish and we are not European. Well, maybe we are European. And maybe we can live up to the same standards. So let's jointly kind of address the issues in such a way that the questions we ask must not be dodged. That would be a big advantage, I think. Any other question or comment? Okay, so I think we've come to the end of the session, and I'd like you to give a big hand of applause to our most experienced and interesting speakers. Thank you very much for addressing this audience.